Input Output. Change your environment, change your life. Written by Moses Pierre Paul, narrated by Moses Pierre Paul. Preface. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon while sitting at my mom's dining room table when I got a text message that got me thinking. That morning, I had given the sermon at my church, and an associate of mine that heard about it asked me where I learned to become the man I am today. Surprised by his question, the first thing that came to mind was, take the negativity out of your life and increase the positivity. And so, that's the gist of what I told him. Later, when I thought about it, I wasn't so sure my answer was helpful to him. But although I might have been vague, my reply wasn't random. Up until then, I often wondered why my life turned out different, even more so since a handful of the people I grew up with have either lost their life, mine, or freedom. How am I different? During the early part of my life, I lived with my mom, older sister, and little brother in an inner city area called Baintown. Baintown, which is located in the capital of the Bahamas, is a low-income area, and my mom, who immigrated from Haiti, had very little to support my siblings and me. She often shares how at one point our rent was only $7 a week and she could not afford it. Beyond the economic challenges, there were many bad influences, and as a naive little boy, I got caught up in many of them. I can still remember throwing glass bottles at kids from another school, even though I would have only been in grade 3 or 4. But something happened just before I turned 9. Due to financial struggles, my mom, little brother, and I moved to the United States to live with my aunt and her family. Although it was for the better, that transition for me had its own series of challenges. Despite them, living with my aunt was a pivotal point in my development. My aunt's home was strict, and the discipline I received while living there improved my character. 3 years later, we moved back to Baintown, and even though I wasn't the same, I still found my way back into trouble. Baintown wasn't all that bad, however. I remember the sense of community and looking forward to the weekly opportunity to attend church. Attending church, which was in another area, was similar to living with my aunt in the United States. Each visit, in little ways that I can only now appreciate, made subtle improvements to my mentality over time. Fast forward a few years later, I became the youth director, graduated from college, and worked as a freelancer. A few years more, I am married to a wonderful woman, live in my own home, and have a rewarding career. What's more, I was honored to be elected an elder at the same church I looked forward to attending each week. Compared to some people, what has become of my life at the age of 29 isn't that impressive, but considering where I started and had a high probability of ending up, it is far better than I or anyone else could have imagined. This short audiobook is my attempt to share what I believe to be the reason why. If you apply it, I assure you your life will change also. Enjoy. Chapter 1. The Law of Input-Output. There is a simple yet powerful law that exists and is the basis for much of how the world works. You've likely heard or referred to it by another name, but in this audiobook, I'll call it the Law of Input-Output. I define it as whatever goes into something determines what comes out of it. Unlike a law that is put into place and enforced by a government, input-output is a natural law. This means it never changes. Just like the law of gravity guarantees that anyone or anything that falls off a building will end up on the ground, the law of input-output has a consistent effect on anyone or anything that meets its criteria. Input-output is everywhere. You can find the law of input-output at work in every area of life. At times, it doesn't seem consistent, but a closer look will always show it is. Take computers, for example. If you were to study computers, you will encounter a subtopic that's called input-output. How do I know? I majored in computer information systems, and input-output in computing is admittedly one of the things that inspired this audiobook. In computing, there are devices classified as input devices and others classified as output devices. Examples of a computer's input devices are the mouse and keyboard. They are considered input devices because they are the devices that allow us to insert data into a computer. On the other hand, examples of output devices are monitors and printers. It is through them that data comes out of a computer. In accordance with the law of input-output, Computers can only give output in response to what they receive as input. In other words, if two different people use the computer in the same way, they can expect the same results. If you don't put anything in, you won't get anything out. Or, as you may be familiar, garbage in, garbage out. Let's look at another area. You can also find the law of input-output at work in biology. Whether it's a tree, animal, or human being, each looks like what it came from. As a human being, your traits such as your eye color and skin color came from your parents. Your eyes may look like your mother's eyes, and your nose may look like your father's nose. Your parents, in turn, received their traits from their parents, and so on. The way a person looks, output, is based on the genetics, input, their parents contributed when they were conceived. Even if you can't point out a child's traits in their immediate parents, you are sure to find it somewhere in their family tree. As you would expect, animals are the same, and when it comes to trees, the seeds that come from them grow to become like them. As a final example, we are all aware of how diet and exercise affect our health. We know that if we are gaining weight, there's a reason for it, and if the reason happens to be diet related, we make changes in order to see a difference. The reason you have the confidence that if you change your diet, you will change your weight is because of the law of input-output. Altering the input of diet affects the output of weight. Focus on the input. From the examples I gave, you may have noticed that each output starts with an input. Because of this arrangement, whenever you want to change a particular output, you should focus on changing the input that caused it. Now you may be thinking that's obvious. After all, I just gave the example of how we know we have to change our diet in order to change our weight. You are correct. But it's only obvious if you're looking at a small part of a bigger picture. If a person's diet is the reason for their weight, the law of input-output dictates that there must also be a reason behind a person's diet. Once we find that reason, there must also be a reason behind it. Each step back eventually points to a primary reason. That primary reason, which is not only the reason behind our diet, but also what we become in life, is what we'll explore in the next chapter. As the primary input, it's the input you should focus on if you want to change your life.